You're listening to the Faith and Other Oddities podcast, brought to you by the Raven Creek Social Club, where we talk about faith and other oddities. For questions, comments, or to be part of the conversation, join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find us at Raven Creek SC. Now for your hosts, Emily Dixon and Nathan Underwood.
When she got up this morning, she stumbles in at 7:20, and she comes in there where I'm at, and she snuggles in real close. And then she says, "I want to play with your phone." And I mean, it's like, okay, child, number one, you woke me up to play with my phone.
Yeah.
Number two, you were sick just long enough for us not to go out for dinner last night.
Just enough time. Yeah, but we ordered in some pizza though. So we had a consolation prize. So anyone in Norman, not a sponsor, but Stars and Stripes Pizza. If you haven't had them yet, pretty good for the cost. Actually, I think they're just as good as like Pizza Hut or Mazzio's or any of the other local establishments. Better than Papa John's. Like,
I was actually impressed with the quality of pizza.
Yeah,
so.
and their specialty pizzas are I think $8 for a large. I mean, you can't hardly beat the price, and the quality's there. And I was talking to Mickey the other day. We were talking about getting pizza. She's like, maybe we can just grab a hot and ready pizza on the way home. I'm like, if we're gonna go, the hot and ready pizza's $5 at Little Caesars, right?
Right.
So I'm like, let's spend $3 more and get something fresh, something that has more flavor.
Something you actually want to eat.
Yeah, like the hot and ready pizza, it's not a good deal anymore when you have someone, when you have some other people who can do a better pizza. And even like Pizza Hut, sometimes online, they'll do online specials of 2 topping large pizzas for $7.99. So, you keep your eye open for those, and you're not out that much. So.
Well, and where I'm at, pizza's like not something I get very. Excuse me. Those frogs are creeping in. But not something you get very often because just location, and
right.
We just don't eat out. Well, and if we do eat out, it's going to be Mexican. I mean, Mexican or sushi.
Right.
Took me 2 years to convince Ty that sushi was real food, and now he's like addicted way more than I think I am. So pizza's kind of like a nice change.
Yeah. Well, and yeah. So I mean, and yeah, it's good stuff. We like it, and I think I like pizza more than Mickey does, but I was, I kind of felt bad because we were geared up to go and eat someplace nice. And then I was like, we might as well get something from a restaurant to eat. Because a lot of times when you come in, you just watch the kids and eat whatever we have in the house.
Yeah. Leftovers, frozen pizza, mac and cheese seems to be a standard.
Yeah, it's just something easy for people who are watching the kids to fix. But anyway, so
speaking of fixing things for your kids,
watching the kids,
well, guarding flocks,
different type of kid.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, works. And so, yeah, Jacob has, I think we left him last time we were talking about his use of sympathetic magic to get these spotted, speckled, and streaked critters from the flocks.
Right.
And that was going to be his wages from Laban, because he had to figure out an airtight way to get paid without Laban being able to hijack it somehow.
Yeah. After the last bait and switch.
Yeah, we certainly don't ask him for another daughter.
Yeah,
that's
how that turns out.
Yeah.
Well, I think about that. By that time, he's all spoused up. He's hit his limit.
Yeah, because he's at 4 at this point, because he's got Rachel and Leah and both of their maidservants. And it's during this time that he's like, he tells Laban basically, you have changed my wages 10 times in the time that I've been here.
Right.
So you just keep your money, and here's what we're going to do.
Right.
And I think Laban kind of has an idea that, wait a minute, there's something off with this deal, but I can't see the flaw in it.
Just something not quite there, but yeah. So yeah, and then we talked about how we try to justify the use of sympathetic magic, and now we talked to you kind of alluded to this. I don't know if we specifically said it, but he tries to explain it to Rachel and Leah later on by saying that God told him to do it in a dream.
Right.
Now, what we were talking about is the possibility that he was, maybe being dishonest. Maybe he was lying.
He was
about
being
that.
Jacob.
Yeah, being Jacob. And maybe we did talk about it, but he was he was trying to cover his tracks.
And that's a possibility, because when he does it, when the first time it's told what he's doing, and and he's even going to the extent of when the weak animals come up to the water trough to do their business, he decides to take the weak ones away. He won't put the sticks out for the weak ones.
Right.
It's only for the strong ones that he's willing to do this. And there's no mention of God anywhere in that account. And so, did God really tell him to do this? Or is this his way? Because we'll kind of read through it as we get to that point when he's talking to Rachel and Leah. He's really, he's putting, trying to remember the word. He's doing the whole sales pitch, and he's schmoozing, and he's trying to explain to them exactly why they need to be okay leaving, because they're going to be he's going to be taking them and their kids on this massive journey across the desert, away from anything they've known. And I've known people who won't move across town from their parents.
Right.
And why do we think that biblical people, human beings, are going to be any different than people today on things like that?
Yeah. So yeah, you said you had more stuff about the sympathetic magic aspect of this, though. So I'm curious to hear what you've got.
Yeah,
on that.
because this it is important. And the reason why it's important is it establishes who Jacob is, and not just the trickster side of him. So I want to go back over the definition that I gave last time, in case anybody slept since last week, and which I'm hoping y'all guys are getting a chance to do. No screaming kids in the house. But there are James Frazier wrote The Golden Bough. It's kind of the not to use a pun, but it's the gold standard for talking about mythologies and magics and different things in ancient cultures. And he is, he's a lot of fun to read, because if you read through his things, he's just got a ton of myths and mythologies that he's put together in something that they call comparative religions.
Right.
Now, comparative religions as a study has really fallen out of favor, but it's interesting, because I think you're going to come across some stories that you may not come across in any other works that you might read. So,
right.
And it's very easy to read.
I have to look that up.
Yeah. So I think it's worth reading. But if you want to talk myth and mythology, James Frazier and Joseph Campbell, those are your two.
Those are your go-to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Edith Hamilton is the other one.
Sure.
So got to throw a woman in there. But okay, so there's two types of sympathetic magic, and there's the law of similarity, like produces like, and this is exactly what Jacob is doing. He is creating white spots on these sticks, and these white sticks, or these sticks with white spots, are producing sheep with spots.
Right.
And it's kind of funny, because the word Laban actually means white. So there's kind of this idea that Jacob is beating Laban at his own game, but it's kind of put in there with that little play on words. And
yeah,
that's one of the things that you aren't going to get if you read it in English. So another reason why, if you ever get a chance to study Hebrew, just do it. The second law of sympathetic magic is the law of contagion or contact. So basically, if something has been blessed or has been cursed, and you come in contact with it, then that blessing and curse, I don't know where the word curse came from, that blessing and curse can be transmitted to you.
Yeah. Now, here's actually something, you're talking about the contagion aspect of this. This is actually something that Mickey, because I talked to her once about this years ago. I don't even know why we were talking about it. It's a weird topic to discuss.
Hence the oddities.
Yeah. So it is a funny topic to just randomly discuss. I don't remember why we were talking about it, but she said that she remembers hearing the story growing up, and her understanding of the way it was taught was that he was putting the sticks in the drinking water, and that what they were drinking did something to the goats and the sheep. And so that, when you talk about the contagion aspect, that was something that just kind of sprung to mind.
That's been something that's been bannered around because I think a lot of Christians are trying to understand how this happened.
Mhm.
There's this whole school of thought out there that's trying to debunk the miracles. Manna was snail poop, and that's
I've heard that. Yeah, there's like a either caterpillar excrement or
Mhm.
snail leavens.
Yeah, and I
Are there
think
snails in the desert? Is there enough moisture?
that's a good question. I'd have to look
I
that
would
up.
have to. Yeah, I don't know.
But there's this idea that maybe if we can kind of come up with a logical solution, then maybe it's going to make more sense. And there's even, genetics and how does all that come into work. And for a long time, when Christians were trying to rationalize or justify this, there's a problem with they didn't know anything about genetics. They didn't know anything about how all this went together. So, a law of similarity, an example of what that would look like, we can look at idols. Idols were created to look like the gods that
Mhm.
they represented. And so the gods would then be able to inhabit them because there was a similar image for them to descend into.
Yeah.
And then the law of contagion, blessed and cursed food. If you eat blessed food, then you're going to be happy and you're going to experience prosperity. Cursed food, which is actually probably poisoned, but
It's
semantics.
whatever. Yeah.
so, so that's how kind of what it works. But there is in this society, you've got three different kinds of thought going on, and one would be called pure magic. And pure magic is the idea that magic is an impersonal force that people can access it, kind of like the force maybe in Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah. That would make sense.
Yeah, it just exists, and if you know how to access it and activate it correctly, then you can gain some kind of benefit from
Sure.
using it. But to activate it, you have to do it through sympathetic magic, and that's
Some kind of ritual.
right. And it's a specific ritual. It can't just be anything. You have to know the right words. You have to
Sure.
know, and this is where we get the idea of casting spells and all of that sort
Mhm.
of thing. And you have to use the precise objects. There's not you can't just use anything. Again, you've got to know the secret code in
Right.
order to crack it. And it's only performed by specific people. And these people are what we would call shaman or holy men, or they've got some kind of standing in the spiritual world that would give them that kind of input or
Right.
yeah.
So some kind of prophetic in.
Exactly. And that's in doing this, Jacob is actually hitting a lot of those because now he's hitting that pure magic aspect because we know that the branches are magical objects.
Sure.
He knows the precise manner and how to use them. He offers sacrifices later on, so he operates as a holy man, and it produces a real observable effect, and it seems to operate on a cause and effect basis. Now, the Bible attributes obviously the cause to God. The cause is God.
Sure.
But by allowing Jacob to do this, God is really putting him in the position of a holy man as having access to a higher spiritual realm than anybody else around him.
Right.
And that's important for prestige. That's important for what he's getting ready to walk into. He's now not just in the eyes of God as having been called. Remember, Abraham had that moment with Abimelech where he's identified as a prophet.
Right.
Now he's not just somebody who's called, he is actually somebody who has spiritual powers. And he's being established in the eyes of the community as someone with spiritual powers.
Hmm.
And so it's not, we need to be careful because it's not necessarily that this is what he was supposed to do. As we discussed, there's that question whether God told him to do it or not.
Right.
But there is that God using it
Right.
aspect of
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah, and that's again back to the overall theme of the Old Testament, that it's again when we put the focus on Jacob or on Abraham or on Isaac or any character, we think it's their story. And it is to a degree their character in the story, but we see that the only character in all of it is God. And so we we see that it's actually him stepping in and redeeming situation after situation after situation that humanity manages to mess up over and over again.
And I think this kind of wrapping everything up with Jacob's time with Laban kind of being the final, almost the final scene.
Mhm.
It demonstrates who Jacob is becoming as he's with Laban.
Right.
And that's the real danger of being with Laban and spending all that time there is who is he willing to become?
Yeah.
And because Laban's, I mean, he's picking up on all the things that are a part of Jacob's character, his natural proclivities. And Jacob's the student and Laban's the master.
Right.
And so Laban earlier, whenever he had gone after Jacob, and said, "Hey, don't leave. You need to stay with me
Hmm.
because you're good luck," basically.
Right.
And Laban uses a term there. It's a very interesting term, nakash. And I think you know this much Hebrew. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Nakash is the term that it was for the snake in the garden, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's using that same term. He says, "I've defined this," or "I've nakashed this." That's really bad Hebrew with a English ending there.
Right.
I've defined this, but he's using that word nakash. This is the serpent in the garden. Joseph actually claims to be a nakash whenever the brothers go to Egypt, and says, "Don't you know I'm a diviner?
Okay.
This is how I know what's going on with you guys." And so Laban is, there's some major traditions that we're going to go into later about his background, but the fact that he uses this term, because that term, when you break it down and you look at how is used in scripture, one of the things that you'll notice is it basically boils down to receiving spiritual information through illicit means. That's what the snake tempted.
The term Nakash is
Mhm.
that's the implication is that
Right.
that someone is because if you look at the knowledge of good and evil, it's in that part Jacob using sympathetic magic. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I can see how that would tie together.
Well, and that's Jacob's temptation, because Laban has used many deceitful means to get his way,
Mhm.
and Jacob's used deceitful means to get his way. And now is Jacob going to make the break? That's the big question. And I should point out that in this whole cycle, there's lots of magical elements happening in the story,
Right.
because we had the mandrakes, also a form of sympathetic magic,
Right.
because they looked like
Humans.
yeah, that's the word. Those things.
People.
Yeah. So we got the mandrakes, and then we've got got this going on with the sticks and the sheep, and then we got Laban saying, "Hey, I've divined this. I've nakashed it."
Mm-hmm.
And then when Jacob does get ready to leave, we find out that Rachel decides to steal the teraphim.
Right. So, how you doing over there?
Hi. I got busy talking and about lost my breath.
Yeah. It's all right. Everyone's here for a reason. So, I'm just so Rachel steals the teraphim. Now the teraphim, basically we see household gods in the ESV, which I accidentally read as household goods earlier. As
Rachel
I was
stole his household
stole
goods.
the household goods. I know the household gods, are idols. And now, if I remember right, listening to another podcast on this, there's possible that they were either it could be that they were either Middle Eastern gods or deities. It's also possible that it could just be statues that represented family members in the past, which would fall into ancestor worship, kind of the same way that we would. I mean, not the same way, but similar. But it could also be just having like images of people, like we would hang pictures in our
family
hall.
photo albums.
Yeah, we'd hang pictures in our hall or have family photo albums. That's a possibility as well.
It is a possibility, and teraphim are kind of one of those items in the Bible that was never very clearly defined. They really only show up one other time, and that's when David is trying to get away from Saul,
Mhm.
and Michael helps.
Yeah, and she puts it in the bed.
Yeah, so evidently that was a pretty sizable teraphim.
Yeah. I wonder what it was made out of. Probably wood, I would guess.
I would
But-
hope so, and a light wood at that, because I mean, unless she had servants to help her, which was a possibility.
Well, although it may have just, it may have just been a bust that, put at the top of some pillows or something. I just have the head poking out. So
you would think you'd put the cover. Okay, we spend way too much time trying to figure out exactly how this stuff happened.
hey, it's fun to think about.
Yeah, well, and that's the yeah, that's something we enjoy doing. But these evidently were smaller because Rachel does steal them away, and there's more than one because it is definitely in the plural,
Right.
and there is the idea that, yes, it could have been kind of a representation of the family members, but it could also have been her way of doing two different things. One of them, Laban is a diviner.
Sure.
What's he using to divine with? We know in the Bible, the Urim and Thummim.
The Urim and the
I
Thummim.
mean, yeah, thank you. I don't know why I keep losing words. It's no sleep. Nobody sleeps at your house.
Yes, that's why I talk the way I do.
So, but items are used for divination, the casting of lots, and that kind of thing throughout the Bible. And so there's a possibility that Laban was using these to divine, and she was trying to hide their location.
That would make sense.
And it's a possibility. And then the other thing too is there's a possibility that by owning these, and this could also be where the representation of the family comes in, that by having these, she's staking claim to her inheritance.
Right.
And so I have them, therefore the family blessing has to come with me.
Yeah. Well, there's that. And speaking of inheritance, I mean, even before they leave, you see Laban's sons are getting upset that basically Jacob is getting all the best, the best flocks, and stealing away the inheritance. And so,
which is reminiscent of his interaction with Esau.
Right. And so, yeah, there's that. And as we've covered before, inheritance is your main way to make a legacy. It's the only link. And this is, kind of universal to everyone. It's your only link in a lot of people's minds to possible immortality.
Right. Well, and, if you look at the wording there, Laban has become Jacob's adopted dad.
Mm-hmm.
These Laban's sons, which, by the way, that's the first kind of hint that we have that Laban has sons.
Right.
And so that tells you a little bit about Rachel, the fact that she was able to, or was required or needed to be a shepherdess. How many flocks and goats and sheep did he have?
Right.
And so these guys are Laban's, not Laban's, they're Jacob's brother-in-laws, but at that time they would just be considered brothers. There's no distinction.
Right.
And so we're back to trickery, stealing the birthright, just like with Esau.
Right.
And
no, I didn't have anything. I'm sorry.
I thought you did.
No,
Okay.
I wanted to point that out because you were talking about inheritance and getting all the stuff from the father, which, I mean, I'm sure just depending on what those idols were made out of, or those could actually be worth quite a bit as well, monetarily.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We don't have anything about what material that we were made out of. Really, the only clue we have about their physical nature is the fact that Rachel hides them under a camel saddle.
Right.
And
so they're small enough to fit under the saddle of a camel.
Yeah, and this is
that's not tiny.
It's not tiny, but it's kind of funny. Some of them can actually be smaller than a horse saddle, and I found a few of them in antique stores that I've wanted to buy just to carry around for object
like Middle
lessons.
Eastern ones.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
they can be pretty small, and
yeah, I had no doubt that they could be small. Because I mean, my thought is even about the size of chess pieces for some of these things.
Right.
It could be.
Oh yeah, and so that's the thing. We've kind of got to read between the lines to even get that much what's going on there. But the other thing, which I I kind of lean towards this interpretation of what they're being. What's Rachel's main concern in life?
But children?
Children.
Okay.
So I lean towards the idea that they had something to do with fertility.
Oh, that's a good possibility.
And I'm not the only one. And so this is actually
funny story.
Okay.
So speaking of fertility idols, gods, images, whatever you want to call it. We actually have some of those, or Mom does still.
I was going to ask if you had gotten them.
No. So anyway, Dad had brought those back from the Philippines when he was stationed over there in the Navy, and so there are 2 wooden mugs that we have at the house, and apparently they're supposed to be these fertility mugs that if you drink from them, we use them to hold pencils.
Which might explain why we're writers.
But yeah, it was really funny because I don't remember how it came up, but shortly after Mickey and I got married, we were over there, and Dad saw him or picked one up and said, "Hey, Bub, does Mickey need a new mug?" And so, and I looked at Mickey. I'm like, "Don't take it."
Well, because he didn't even let Mom know what they were forever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I remember when she found out, she was kind of appalled that.
But and the thing is, we didn't make a big deal of them. They were just there. There's cultural artifact more than anything. But we didn't. I didn't know what they were for many years. They were just these funny looking mugs.
The randomness that Dad brought home from his time overseas, and that was actually one of the nicer things he brought home.
So yeah,
there's like a coconut over at Grandma and Grandpa's.
Yeah, that one's still there. That was because he sent that he was in Hawaii when he sent that one back, right?
I don't remember. I just know that he sent it. He just put the mailing label, stapled it to the outside husk.
Yeah, they used to they would just send it that way, and so that one's where did that one wind up?
Mom may have it. I don't know, but yeah,
it was always. I remember it being over there at Grandpa's, and
it's like well over 45 years old at this point.
Oh yeah,
random coconut. Because I'm sure Grandma and Grandpa had no idea what to do with it once it arrived.
Well, they let it dry out. I mean, it's anyway, but that.
Yeah. So fertility and
so it may have been mugs, is what we're trying to say.
Right. Hey, we could have never mind. So the other tie that kind of links us to fertility is the fact that when Laban does chase them down, and Rachel, she's sitting in her tent on the camel saddle, and Laban's rummaging. The word there is that basically he is rummaging through all of their stuff.
Yeah, it says he felt through the tents.
Yeah,
is what it says in the ESV, which I think is kind of funny. Because I can see him going through and like shaking out the curtains and, patting them down.
Yeah.
Which would lead me to believe that they were small items.
Right. So he knew they could be hidden anywhere. And so that makes sense. And, she's sitting on this saddle. And when he's going through her stuff, I'll just read what this translation says. Let the Lord not take it amiss that I cannot rise before you. The period of women is upon me.
Yeah, ESV says the way of women. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we need to really explain that. I mean,
no, well, I do want, one of the things I do love about this is it goes to show that in that culture, those things were not hidden.
Right.
Because most girls don't talk to their dads about their periods. That's just.
And it was a bigger thing in that culture. And that's actually, I mean, when you look at, the sanitary items available to women today is it revolutionized the world.
Oh yeah,
because it was a big deal. It was a lot harder to take care of, and everyone wants to talk about how terrible it was that they were kind of excluded from everything. But when you didn't have any reliable way to keep things sanitary, you just kind of had to, and so yeah, there's. Some cultures do take that into a shameful way of things, but I think we almost kind of have more shame on it in a modern context because it is much less open. We're a lot more private about it.
Oh, yeah. And we could talk, I mean, I won't go into it, but there's stories of things that women have done, extreme things even today, to try to hide the fact that they're dealing with this. And what I love about this story is the fact that she is so open with it. There is no shame. Even if she wasn't on her period at this time, she's still willing to use it as an excuse.
Right.
And the other thing that I think we miss when we look at the Levitical laws, where we're starting to separate women out during that time, anything a woman touched was considered unclean. So this means cooking and cleaning and things like that were, I mean, what was the point? She was just they were now going to have to purify those items.
Right. Which you couldn't do with cooked food.
Right.
With unclean food, you just had to throw it out.
So this is a week where she really gets to take care of herself, where she could be with other women. Give me that week off. I'll take it.
Well, and the other thing, I lost my train of thought on that with the unclean, has to throw it out. Oh yeah, and the other thing is, again, and I know we've mentioned this, but we think of unclean as sinful in the 21st whatever century we're in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've really conflated those two things, and ceremonial ritual purity is different than being sinful.
Precisely.
And now, does Paul use clean and unclean later to be analogous of sin and Christ's purification? Sure, he absolutely does. But it's not the same. The analogy, at no point does an analogy. Sorry, that's hard to say. It's like spelling banana.
No.
But at no point should our analogy overtake, or should it take the place of what we're trying to explain?
Right.
Which is another thing. I love it. Sorry, I'm going to go on a quick tangent here. We've all been in that situation where we try to explain something or try to represent something by using an analogy, and the person who's against you is like, well, that's an oversimplification. It's like, yeah, that's what an analogy is. It's a simplification. It's a starting point. And if you think that, if at any point someone arguing with you thinks that your analogy is your attempt to like fully define something, they're not getting the point of what you're doing. So that's my little tangent there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, to me, that's frustrating. It's like, that's an oversimplification. Yes, I know.
Well, and most analogies break down at some point, and we just have to accept that. And is this going to provide you a good toehold to get a concept?
Yes.
And then we can go deeper.
Yeah, that's the point. The point is to simplify. But anyway, go ahead.
So, yeah. So I think the fact that she's willing to use this excuse that when confronting Laban, she's almost saying, hey, look, I can still have kids. Because remember, Sarah, when she's talking, the way of women is not upon me, whatever, however she phrased it, but it's very similar wording. And so she's like, I can still have kids. I need these more than you do. It's kind of almost what she's saying to him. And I think we as a reader get that. Now, whether Laban got that or not, we may not hear, he may not have heard the same thing that we're hearing.
Well, and also he didn't know she had them.
Right.
So, he wouldn't have picked up on that part of it.
Yeah. And so I just, to me, the fact that it is related to the fact that she is still able to have, the statement that she's still able to have children, and this is what she's hiding, that makes me, and plus her just sheer desperation for a child, that makes me lean towards the fertility interpretation of what's going on. But that kind of covers as far as what they were. But I want to back up to when Laban catches Jacob.
Okay.
So Laban basically this is 31 verse 28 is where we're starting. Actually, verse 27. Jacob's like, why did you run off? I would have sent you off with a parade. We would have hired a band. Laban, yeah, I would have hired a band. And, you didn't let me kiss them goodbye. And
She's paraphrasing.
Yeah, greatly. But
To anyone reading, what translation is that? Sorry.
the ESV, the Emily Standard Version.
Emily Simplified Version.
There you go. And but then he finishes off his little speech where he's kind of like, hey, look, I'm a great guy, because this is what Laban always says whenever he talks to anybody. I'm a great guy.
Yeah.
And you need to know this. He says, why did you steal my gods? And Jacob answers Laban. He says, 1, I was afraid. So who does this sound like? We're back with Abraham talking to Abimelech.
Right.
I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters, or Abraham, you would take my wife.
So we're retelling it again.
Mm-hmm. But anyone with whom you find your God shall not remain alive. And Jacob's starting to, notice Laban's my gods, and Jacob's your gods.
Right.
So we're starting to see a little break here. Jacob's starting to kind of put some distance. Those are Laban's gods.
Mhm.
Those aren't my gods. But then Jacob, dear sweet Jacob, idiot that he can be sometimes, he makes this horrible pronouncement. He says, but anyone whom you find with your gods shall not remain alive.
Right.
He has just spoken Rachel's death sentence.
Well, that is if Laban finds the gods.
Actually, no, because she does die.
Okay.
And she dies in childbirth. And she dies in the midst of the act that she had been praying for, that she had wanted so desperately, that she'd been willing to risk her father's wrath.
Right.
And sympathetic magic and magic period up to this point has been working.
Sure.
And so throughout this story. But the problem with whenever you start moving in these circles, what you wind up with is magic works in the Bible, but it only works to a point.
Sure.
And so it's worked for her. And this is the son that she will have. She'll have Benjamin, and she'll die in childbirth with Benjamin. But Rachel, Rachel's been very much a part of this whole scenario. Everything that's gone down, she's been manipulating along with Laban. I mean, why wasn't she screaming her head off when they put Leah in the tent?
Right.
Why wasn't she throwing a fit? Oh, I'm not having kids. Here's my maid. Take her. Rachel's the one who started that.
Right.
And now, okay, hey, we're going to put one over on good old dad. I mean, I can't blame her. The guy sold her off like livestock.
Right.
But she's gonna play along. And then, hey, I need kids, so let's steal the fertility gods. Let's do this. So this is now that's reading it through my lens.
Sure.
That I did the teraphim are fertility gods. But again, I think it makes sense, and there's a lot of reasons for that, because when she names Benjamin, that's a horrible name. It's son of my sorrow.
Right.
Son of my affliction. But another possible translation, and this has been proposed, I believe it was Rashi who proposed it, son of my sin.
Yeah.
And so when we read that, when she does die, are we reading that as a confession? Are we reading that as her saying, hey, this is where I messed up? And that would be kind of huge. And when she dies, she's dying en route to Bethlehem. And Jacob actually changed the son's name. And then she's using that word for affliction, which we find in Exodus with the slavery. We find in, where else? Anyway, other places where we find the word affliction, but specifically with Egypt, whenever we're going into the first chapter of Exodus.
Right.
And she's kind of outcast at this point because she's not buried with the others. Jacob and Leah are buried together, but Jacob and Rachel are not.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so the fact that she was giving birth on the way to Bethlehem, that's actually going to come in very big, I think probably next episode. But I'm getting lost in my notes here.
All the notes.
All the notes. Yeah. But okay, so but before we get there, I wanted to point out too that this story of Jacob running away needs to be read in the context of Genesis 3.
Okay.
Because Jacob,
in Genesis 3, that's the fall. That's the fall. That's where they get sent out from the garden.
Mm-hmm,
okay.
Yeah. And I said, I think it was the last episode, Jacob's name means heel.
Uh-huh.
So when we talk about heels in the Bible, we go back to, the serpent will nip at the heel, and
we'll strike your heel and
you'll crush his head.
You'll crush his head.
Yes,
yeah.
That was the word I was looking for.
So
So we're taken back there. Laban says the exact same words that God does. What have you done?
Right.
And they're hiding. They're running away.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, Laban says, "You stole my heart." In the Hebrew, that's literally.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so, what did Adam and Eve functionally do?
Right.
When God calls out for Adam, Adam's response, God says, why did you hide? And Adam says, I was afraid.
Now, does this have anything to do with the, you're going to love this question. Does this have anything to do with the idea of Eden as a temple and man as God's representation, such as often is put together as like in being the image, like an idol would be an image? I know that there is, I can't remember who it was you said did that, but I remember we were talking about some work. So does this also have, so Adam was hiding, and then you have the hidden teraphim, and I was just wondering, is there any kind of parallel with that, or is there, or have you run across any of that in your notes?
I haven't read.
Well, not in your notes, but in your study.
Yeah, definitely don't have it in my notes. I haven't read anything specifically. What Nathan was referring to, that's actually John Walton's. Walton,
yeah, I knew. Yeah, I couldn't think of the name. Sorry.
Yeah, he's amazing. John Walton's stuff is like right up there, top shelf. He's just brilliant. But one of the things, he wrote a book called Genesis Lost, or The Lost World of Genesis, and available on Amazon. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. And essentially, if you read Genesis, specifically Genesis 2, and that may actually be something that we do a little bit more work with on maybe a bonus episode or something.
Sure.
And, but Genesis 2 is a temple account. It's all about setting up a temple. So as God's creating Eden, he's actually building a temple.
Right.
And the last thing you put in a temple is the image of the God. And when you put the image of the God in, then you ceremonially open the eyes, mouth, and ears. And so the spirit, the breath, because in Hebrew it's the same word,
right,
can inhabit that idol and now bring it to life in a metaphoric or symbolic fashion. But God does it in a realistic fashion when he breathes his breath into Adam to bring him to life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if it has anything as far as like the teraphim being hidden, or maybe the teraphim being subjugated. Kind of the idea of not taking that prominent place where Jacob is starting to take that prominent place.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering, because you were talking about this being being sent out from the gardens and out. So I was wondering if the hiding of the teraphim and the hiding of Adam had any kind of parallel. If anyone else has any information on that, let us know.
Or even thoughts.
Thoughts. Yeah, we'll take that too.
But I think
that's what we do here. We think.
Well, and I think this is what really ties in, because we talked about how the retellings help you understand one story to the next. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where it really ties in the two accounts, is because when Jacob says, whoever has your gods will not remain alive, there's also that pronouncement of death in Genesis 3 that it didn't happen immediately.
Right.
It happens later. And that's the same thing that happens with Rachel. So I think we have to read both kind of together to kind of flesh it out.
Right.
Because, in Genesis 3, the story was about sacred space lost. Mm-hmm. And Jacob's story is about sacred space regained. And so that's what that's where the two become subversive.
Right.
And
okay. No, it's pretty interesting. I like that.
I think it's those are the fun things I like to pull on, because it helps you get deeper into that text, because when we recognize how succinct that the Bible is and how it's using its words very economically,
Mhm.
then it can actually pack a lot more details in by including those stories to work off each other.
Right.
And so there's actually another story that plays off of Rachel's story is found in Samuel.
Okay. And is this just tell me, I can't think of her name. I lost her name. Go ahead.
Actually, it's kind of an overall thing, because I don't want to go too deep into it. But Saul,
Mhm.
sorry, not Samuel. Saul's a Benjaminite, so the son that Rachel gave birth to at her death.
Mhm.
It's about losing kingship, and about when Saul consults with a witch. We've got those themes of magic running through there.
Oh, yeah.
The first sign that Samuel gives to Saul that he's going to be a king is that he's got to go to Rachel's tomb.
Okay.
And so you're sent right back there. Saul's daughter have the teraphim. Again, like I said, that's one of the few places that shows up in the Bible. And the tradition, this is in the Midrash and again, not in the Bible, is that Michal never had a child until the day of her death.
Interesting.
Just like Rachel. First Samuel opens with the capture of the ark and the death of Eli and his sons. Eli's daughter, a daughter-in-law, gives birth and dies, and she names her son, that wonderful, great name, Ichabod. The glory has departed. And this is it all, the women dying in childbirth, that those themes bring you back to Rachel. And Saul, because of his lineage, bring you back to Rachel. And the fact he's going to her tomb, bring you back to Rachel. So you're supposed to read that story, maybe not seeing explicit point-by-point connections, but that you're still supposed to have her in mind. And so she informs, her death, life and death inform your understanding. And the thing is, with Rachel, Jacob changes the name.
Right.
And so now it's no longer son of my sorrow. When the glory departs from Shiloh and from Israel in particular, Shiloh in particular, Israel in general, there's no father to change the name.
Okay.
And so it's the necessity of a father to be able to name his children and to actually guide them into their destiny.
Right.
And Jacob, that's going to be something he's going to wrestle with throughout. And he's really not going to get it right until he's almost dead. And like so many other biblical characters.
Like so many people. That's...
And so, and that's, I mean, I know that sounded real kind of sketchy and that was kind of loose, but to get into it, we would have to spend a lot of time in Samuel, and we've talked about, I think we're going to go there.
We are going to go there pretty soon. I think we're going to probably, just to let everyone know, kind of what to expect, because we are getting close to the end of, pretty close to the end of Genesis. We still have Joseph to cover, and that's going to be really fun. We'll probably be there for a little while, but by the time we wrap up, with Genesis, there's actually another podcast that we like a lot, that we like a lot. And they're actually getting ready to cover Exodus.
They started.
That's right. They actually have just started Exodus. Excuse me. So we know that, it's the Naked Bible podcast with Dr. Heiser. We know he's going to do a much better job than we could with Exodus. And so
we're going to let him have it.
We're going to let him do that because he's just that good. And again, we're trying to be somewhere between Heiser and what you would get on Sunday morning. So we're trying to go there. Now, what we will probably do is maybe if there's something in there that we found in our studies that we find interesting, we might come back and do like a truncated Exodus series. But I don't want to try to cover that while Heiser's covering it, because I know there's just going to be so much good information there that if you really want to get into Exodus, Go check it out. Naked Bible Podcast. I don't remember the exact address, but we'll link to it in the show
yeah,
notes.
we'll link to it, and if you Google that, you're going to find it.
Yeah, and if you DRMSH is his website for Dr. Michael S. Heiser, so drmsh.com. Yeah, that's a fantastic resource. So, but I figured yeah. So we're looking at he's also covered Leviticus, so we're not going to go in that. Deuteronomy, I don't think we're qualified for. I'm not qualified for.
Well, and we may go through and pull out some fun things that we want to talk about, but as far as like Exodus, we don't need to distract from what he's doing. Not that we got a huge following like he does, but at the same time, if you want to continue with this, he's a great place to go. And
so we're thinking of Judges because we know that we're kind of trying to look at overlooked stories, overlooked details, and things like that. So we will probably be heading to Judges when we wrap up Genesis. I know that's probably still several weeks out before we get there.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to throw that out there to everyone to kind of get an idea of what to look forward and not to be disappointed if we don't jump right into Exodus after this, because Exodus is a fun book. There's a lot of great stuff.
There is some fun thing, and there may be just a couple of things that we do pull out of Exodus at some point, but we just, we're trying to be respectful. It's kind of what it boils down to. And so, but that's the reason why, even with this, talking about Rachel and Samuel and all of that, I didn't want to go too deep into it because Samuel is like one of the most artfully written books.
It's beautiful. And so, yeah, it's going to be really fun to get into that. I can't wait. I mean, although Judges is a whole lot of fun too. So
Judges is just fun because that is the action genre of the Bible. I mean,
it's like that. It's like an action montage almost.
It's Chuck Norris.
And then, so we are super excited. Hopefully we'll be able to get into that before too long, but we also like where we're at. So we don't want to neglect where we are, but, Ruth is going to be another fun one to get into, because I know even though we've heard it a lot in Sunday school, we've heard a lot of things that were incorrect. So,
things that'll make you raise your eyebrows.
So, and you know what? Maybe we can do a vote in the paddle store. Who wants to, we want to do next. But
so if you want to be a part of the vote, become a supporter on Patreon.
Yeah, go to Patreon. Yeah, you can get in the paddle store by going to patreon.com. Any level of membership gets you in. And that can be found by going to Raven Creek SC. Click the support link on the bottom right. And just kind of follow what we got there. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on like a whole advertising tangent. I'm not trying to wrap up the show. Did you have anything else you wanted to throw in?
I will bring up two things,
Okay.
and then we'll call it good for this episode. After Laban goes and rummages around in the tents, Jacob gets angry for only the second time in his entire life story at this point.
Okay.
And it's like he realizes, I am literally being abused. Because only slaves don't have the rights to privacy. And that's something, if you read the halakha, which that's the Jewish writings on how to live and how to actually apply the law.
Right.
And Dr. Brad Young actually has some great stuff in his books about that.
Yeah, Dr. Young has that. Dr. Maxie Birch also has a great bit on that on Christian History of Christianity podcast. We'll link to that one as well. He does cover that pretty well in in one of those episodes as well. And I do definitely recommend check those out because he's a fun teacher. It's definitely a college course, but it's very easy to understand.
And if you want to learn, I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to buying the books and spending the time listening to the lectures. And it's just the investment you have to make. And so the halakha is very specific about personal rights, personal privacy. And so this was really a huge breach of etiquette and also very telling of Laban's view of Jacob.
Right.
That he would even dare to do this. And I think this is kind of what cements that break between the two. when Jacob's like, I am done. Because when he tried to leave the first time, Jacob's like, Laban's, so what's it going to take to keep you here?
Right.
And the thing that stands out when Jacob was heading to Laban's house, he was dreaming of angels. He was dreaming of God. He was dreaming of what his future and identity were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
By the time he leaves Laban's house, he's dreaming of sheep.
Right.
And so his dreams are changing because he's starting to look like Laban. And it's starting to be about what can I gain? Because sheep is basically money. So if you're dreaming about money,
right,
your heart's in the wrong place. And so there's kind of a question, and I don't think we can answer it from the text, but I think it's worth considering. Who is Jacob really angry at? Is he angry at God, not God, or Laban, or is he angry at himself for forgetting who God has called him to be?
That's an interesting take on it. I hadn't come across that before.
Yeah, because here's, he has gone from being kind of hesitant when his mom suggests tricking his father.
Right.
To straight up, full on resorting to magic in order to get the most out of a situation.
Yeah.
So this is what Laban's danger to Jacob really is, because Laban is everything Jacob naturally is inclined to be anyway.
Right.
And he's really bringing that out in Jacob. And so Jacob knows he's got to get away. And it's not just a matter of wealth. It's a matter of his identity.
Yeah. Well, and so was that it?
That's, I mean.
Okay. So if we want to draw a Sunday school illustration out of this, pick your friends wisely.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I'm not going to reduce the whole thing down to that. No, there's so much more going on in this story, but I think the main thing we need to do is remember we need to read this looking at how God is interacting with humanity and not and get our focus off of the individuals in the story as the people we're supposed to be imitating and the people we're supposed to be glorifying, because there really is no there's no way to justify what people do and what these people have done.
Well, and it's more complex than just right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because we couldn't say, oh, well, then he should have never gone to Laban's. No, his mom and dad sent him there.
Right.
So he needed to go there. Now, was he supposed to stay there?
Right.
Maybe not.
He was supposed to stay there until
Rebecca sent for him.
Yeah, he was supposed to stay there until Esau quit being angry with him.
Right.
Now, did that take 14 years? Probably not.
Not knowing what we know about Esau.
Right. And so, how many, and what we don't get in the story is how many times did Rebecca send for him? How many times?
Or did she send for him at all?
Did she send for him at all? There's lots of questions that are out there to be pondered. And I do really wonder about that. Did she send for him, and did he say, well, I kind of got myself in a 7-year contract?
Well, and at what point did he forget God's promise to take him back? I mean, was it when he saw Rachel and, lust is ignited and suddenly he forgets what God has told him to do? And when he looked at Rachel, was he seeing her as his future, as his destiny to join in this covenant promise? Or was he seeing her as the lamb that she was named for, another part of the flock, another part of becoming rich, and God just saying, hey, if that's what you want, I'll step back for a little while, and because God's really good at that. Right. And then Laban does his fancy footwork, and that's how easy it is. I mean, Rachel may not have been the choice that God had for Jacob. And it could have been that, because after he married Leah, he could have said, you know what, I'm out of here. I got a wife. This is what I was supposed to accomplish. Let's go back.
Yeah. Speaking of questions from the text, here's an interesting one. I'm just going to throw this out there for future speculation for, whatever we want to think about. So we talk about the inheritance and the birthright.
Mm-hmm.
And the blessing, or the blessing and the birthright. So had Jacob not stolen the birthright, God still would have delivered on his promise. We know that. Right. Just because of the character of God.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how much how much more smoothly would things have gone? For one, would
if Rebecca had trusted?
Yeah, if Rebecca had trusted, because we see when Jacob comes back, things are not in disarray. Esau's basically taking care of the estate.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to do some maturing while Jacob was away.
Mm-hmm.
And so had Esau stayed in charge and stayed gotten his due as the older brother, how much more, because also, we have him promising to protect Jacob when he returns. So he's obviously got resources and manpower. And I just think about that and I wonder what could that have looked like had Jacob done the right thing, had Rebecca done the right thing, and how would Esau and possibly Edom and Israel grown closer over the years as a result?
Right.
And so I those are things that I wonder about. Would that have been, because what we wind up having is Jacob and his sons go to Egypt because of the famine.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go to Edom.
Right.
And they don't turn to his brothers. So I wonder, it's like, had Esau had those things, this is just pure speculation, would he have been able to build the estate up in that time, not having to go and find a wife and work for 14 years? Would he have been able to have built the estate up to the point that there would have been
enough
provisions where they didn't have to go to Egypt? So again, thoughts, just speculations.
Well,
so.
Now we do know, as far as that goes, that when this began, God did tell Abraham that his children were going to go into bondage for 300 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do know that was kind of unavoidable by the time that Jacob, but how was it going to work out? And that becomes that big question: where does human free will come in? Where does predestination, and is predestination meticulous determinism, and all of those fun theological themes? And that's the reason why I'm glad I'm a text person and not a theological person,
not a systematic theologian.
Yeah, because the text provides enough for us to actually ponder these things, and I think it's good for us to ponder these things because we get to ask, what would I have done if I was in Jacob's place?
Right.
Would I have said, okay, Leah, we're hitting the road now, which I think is probably his best bet, because who knows, that could have been God's way of saying, I've taken care of getting you the right wife.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this gal that you're lusting for, because it's really what it boiled down to, whether he was lusting for her as a person or as that representative of wealth. It wasn't necessarily love, because because when she does it, okay, I can support that. Let me do that.
Go for that. Yeah. Because I'm like, oh, really?
I saw it. When she comes to him and says, give me children so I don't die, or else I'm going to die. And she comes to Jacob, and Jacob's response to her, I said, he gets the second time with Laban when he gets mad. That's the second time he gets mad.
Mm-hmm.
He gets mad at her the first time. And who am I? Do you think I'm God that I can give you children?
Right.
And he had it modeled for him what a husband was supposed to treat his wife like, because when Rebecca went to Isaac prays for Rebecca.
Right.
Jacob never prays for Rachel, and in fact, he's just mean to her in that moment. There's no compassion. He has his sons. He doesn't need her to have sons.
Right. Well, and she's a shepherdess. She's watching the sheep. I can't have you out of commission.
Precisely.
I've got sheep to watch.
And there's that. He should have. If he really loved her, where was the compassion?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Where was But that also goes back to that magical aspect. Did she think? Why didn't she pray for herself? Did she think that Jacob had some kind of special sway?
Sure.
Which he was establishing shortly after that. He establishes his ability, or sometime during that time. We don't know exactly when the whole sheep and the sticks and the goats thing went down, but that's, so he has this reputation of being a holy man, what maybe even what we consider a shaman.
Okay.
And so, yeah. So
cool. Well, that's definitely some fun stuff to ponder. A lot of that we didn't really plan to go into, but enjoy. So, and to everyone out there listening, thank you so much for joining us. We really enjoy doing this. and we want to keep doing it. So please share, subscribe, write us a review. And if you like us, that is. If you don't like us, you can write us a review, I guess. But whatever you want to do.
Can't stop you.
I can't stop you. Yeah, that's how the world works. So, join us again. Be part of the conversation. Kind of guide what we want to do. Let us know what you want to know about Raven Creek SC on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We are going to be there. RavenCreekSC.com in order to find all those places. Find show notes, things like that, by going to RavenCreekSC.com/faith and other oddities. Or you can just go to the homepage and click down at the bottom.
That works.
Yeah, that's probably easier. If you want to support us financially, to help keep all the sound equipment going, upgrading equipment, things like that, Patreon.com/Raven Creek. That's where you can find that. There's a lot of places you can find us online, but if you
Google Raven Creek or Faith and Other Oddities, we come up.
That will get you there. But yes. So I think that's all we got for this week. Until next week, have a great week. Say week again.
Same week again.
I said say week again. I said week like 7 times or something like
that. Could be significant. No.
I don't think it was actually 7. I was exaggerating. So everyone have a great week. Come back and see us next time. Thanks. Bye.
You've been listening to the Faith and Other Oddities podcast, a Raven Creek Social Club production. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you like what you've heard, please write us a review on iTunes or consider supporting us on patreon.com/RavenCreekSC. As always, thank you for listening and don't forget to join us next week.